I now know who my roommate was whispering to at night. I flunked out of my first year of college. I didn't go to any of my classes. Instead, I spent the entire year partying and getting fucked up on whatever drug I could get my hands on. My entire life, I was sheltered by my parents. They never let me do anything that was not according to the Bible. If my friends wanted to watch the newest Harry Potter movie, I wouldn't be able to go because of the witchcraft promotion. If I wanted to go to the mall with my friends, I had to give my parents a 2-week notice so they could think about it. 9 times out of 10, they wouldn't let me leave. That is why, when I went off to college, I went completely insane. I went to any party I was invited to and drank every single night with my roommate on days we didn't have anything to do. As the end of the school year drew close, I became desperate for a place to live. I could not spend another day with my parents. I needed my freedom. So, without giving my family any type of warning, I moved into a friend's house. My friend, Craig, was reluctant at first, but after days of persuading, he finally gave in and told me to move in as soon as the school year was over. When I got to his house, I gave him my final $300, and he told me that I had 2 months before I had to start paying him $200 a month. Despite having to sleep on the couch, I loved it. I still had my freedom, and I even managed to find a job at the local Mexican restaurant within 2 weeks. The next 3 months go by, and I have never been happier. I was now a shift manager, making a little over $10 an hour, and I could still go out and go to the same parties I went to last year. Craig wasn't really around most of the time, but whenever he was home, he would smoke some of his weed, and we'd relax while we watched whatever was on TV at the time. For the last 3 days, everything has gone to complete shit. It all started with Craig running into my room in the middle of the night. I was doing what a lot of men do in bed, with lotion and tissues around their private area. He sat on the bed next to me for the next 20 minutes, muttering the same thing over and over. "She keeps yelling at me. She's from beneath our floors. Where we stand, she says she shouldn't be here." After getting over my initial shock, I tapped him with my non-lotion covered hand and asked, "What do you mean underneath your floor? Some chick you never called back?" He stared at me while muttering that same phrase over and over again. I scooted to the other side of the bed and started to ask him if he could just come back the next morning. But within a blink of an eye, he jumped on top of my legs and shouted, "She wants me dead. She was never grateful and she wants me dead." He got off the bed and walked out. He walked out the door and left me confused for the rest of the night. When I woke up the next morning, Craig was lazily eating a sandwich watching TV. I cautiously walked into the kitchen and grabbed a can of Coke out of the fridge and walked into the living room. A couple of minutes of awkward silence later, Craig cleared his throat and said, "Sorry, man. Smoked way too much weed." I gave him a half-hearted laugh, and the silence continued. He got up after he finished his breakfast and said, "At work all day today. You working today?" I shook my head, and he smirked before saying, "Lucky. Don't smoke all of my weed. If you do, just toss me a 20 or whatever." I don't know when I fell asleep. I smoked a bowl and started watching a movie, but I woke up to the sound of knocking. With a jerk, I woke up and saw that it was dark outside. With a grunt, I pushed myself off the couch and checked the time. 8:15. Shit. The sound of knocking came again, so I walked up to the door and opened it, but there wasn't anyone there. While I was closing the door, I heard a loud knock coming from inside of Craig's room. I rushed to his room and threw open the door. Right when I heard a blood-curdling scream from all around his room. I tried looking all around his room, but after a couple of seconds of looking around, I heard the front door opening. I slowly walked out of his room and saw Craig looking at me with a confused look on his face. With a sheepish grin, I said, "I wanted to find your Sherlock bowl. Mine is all clogged now." He grinned and walked into his room and came back out with his bowl before saying, "I'll just keep this out in the living room now. Just let me know if you need to go into my room." I gave him a nod, and he walked into his room. After a small bowl, I walked into my room and fell asleep while watching a couple of dumb YouTube videos. The sound of harsh whispering broke me out of my slumber. I looked at the alarm clock and saw that it was 4 in the morning. I slowly trudged out of my room and followed the voices. When I got up to Craig's room, I could hear everything being said. "Craig, leave. Don't leave. You shouldn't be here, but you can't leave. Why do you keep yelling at me?" The next voice sent a wave of fear I've never felt before. It belonged to a woman, but every word she said was a mixture of a whisper and a scream, as well as anger and sadness. Let me go. Just let me go. Why do you insist on keeping me here?" It was silent after that. I heard footsteps approaching the door, so I ran back into my room. I couldn't fall back asleep that night. Thoughts kept racing through my head, and every couple of minutes, I could hear them whispering again. Around 9 yesterday morning, I got out of bed and threw on a hoodie before walking into the living room. Craig was sitting on the couch, staring at the sandwich in his hand. I sat next to him and said with a forced chuckle, "I'm moving out at the end of this month, man. I just found an apartment that'll let me move in with just $500 down, and I'm sure you miss having your personal space." He looked at me and stared, and then said, "You can just tell me the truth. Shit is weird now. You hear the whispering, just like I can hear you walking up to my door in the middle of the night." "I understand." With a sigh, I walked out of the door and rode my bike to work. That whole day, I wanted to do the best I could at work, but I was far too distracted. Who was Craig talking to? Why didn't Craig just let her leave? How was he acting so casually about it in the morning? I got off of work around 7 and pedaled as quickly as I could and got home around 5 minutes later. Craig didn't come home until 9 p.m., so I ran into his room and started to look for anything that could answer my questions. It didn't take long. As I walked up to his bed, I felt a small knock come from underneath my feet. I got to my knees and saw a small gap in between a couple of floorboards. I grabbed a pen from Craig's desk and jammed it into the gap and pulled up. A small section of the floor rose up, and I grabbed the front of the section and propped it all the way open. I honestly thought I was going to find a woman in the hole, but instead, there was just a small lunchbox. I grabbed the lunchbox and slowly opened it before looking inside. A thin layer of ash covered the bottom of the lunchbox, and I closed it back up and started to put it back in the opening when I saw a small piece of paper. It read, "To Mom, you will always live with me. I have always loved you, but you did not love me. You yelled at me and told me to become something worthwhile. Well, now you're worthless. You're just powder. No one knows where you are. You're just trash now. Trash in a hole that no one will find. Enjoy the eternity you'll spend in the little makeshift hell I created for you. I don't care if you keep screaming at me, because I control you now." I shoved the note back into the hole and closed it. Craig came home a couple of hours later. He's in his room now talking to his mother, and she is talking to him back. I tried to listen in on what they were saying from the bedroom last night, but no matter how hard I tried, I could not hear anything. I managed to sleep for a couple of hours, but when I woke up this morning, I felt even more exhausted than I did before I slept. I'm packing my stuff now. Craig is at work, and I don't want to be here when he comes back.